professor. Today, Dr. Eric Stein will make the presentation. Dr. Stein is an associate professor of management science and information system at Penn State Great Valley. Dr. Stein earned his PhD in management science from Wharton School, and his work appears in numerous theoretical and applied research journals and books. Let's welcome Dr. Stein.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you guys for coming to today. Maybe we'll get a few more participants. So, well, I'm going to talk about a couple of things today, and feel free if you have a question, let me know. And I'd be happy to stop. So, so what I'm going to go over is I'm going to go over a little bit the context and why I chose to write 2 books on this topic. Next, I'll focus on the 2 books, each in succession. The first one, Fostering Creativity, really focuses on individual development, and the second one focuses on designing teams and organizations. So I'll focus on the 2 of those, and then have a little bit of summary recap, and again Q&A. And if you feel like you'd like to raise a question, please feel free to do so anytime. So why is it that we need to encourage creative expression? And I think there are a lot of reasons, but I'll give you at least a couple of them. I think there's a human need, number one, and I think there's a business need, and something to call what I've called this creative skills gap. So let me try to explain what those things are. Human beings, in essence, love to create. We love to build things. We love to build. We love to architect things. We love to write. We love to produce music. We love to produce everything from bridges to iPods. And it's something that I think is really inherent in our DNA as human beings. We like to build things. So I think there's a real human need, and I think what it does is it unites with 2 things. One, either the ends that we pursue or the things that we do on a daily basis, or the things that give us satisfaction. And if any of you have ever engaged in a creative activity, it's very, very rewarding. You can get into flow, you can really lose yourself, and design is just a wonderful way to express yourself. Whether, it could be coloring, it could be writing a story, it could be taking photographs, but all of those things, are creative outlets that, help us to express that, I think, innate need. The other way we get meaning, of course, is, we focus on the ends. Sometimes the means are not so interesting, but we may produce at the end something that we're, that we're proud of. So I think both of them, creativity gives us an opportunity to express ourselves both through the ends and the means, depending on the modality that we pick. The other, though, component of this is, is what I call the business need. I mean, obviously, companies have to be aware of revenues minus costs equals profits. And so, consequently, they compete on the basis of 2 things, by either differentiating their products and services or through cost-cutting. It's somewhat difficult to do both, but at least in the last 10 years, there have been some interesting books that have shown ways to actually do both of those. But for most organizations, you kind of focus on one or the other. But if you are focusing on differentiation, certainly, and most companies do have kind of, after they've kind of gotten the costs out and other things being equal, they really have to focus on quality and other factors: quality, aesthetics, functionality, and flexibility. These are the things that differentiate, in terms of the value proposition that we offer a buyer. And so those qualities require certain things. And so here's the problem. Attaining the goals of quality, functionality, flexibility demand creative skills and behaviors. From a business perspective, we can't build that into our products and services unless we have relatively creative people. If we're just replicating what we've done for the longest time, but to actually improve quality, increase functionality, aesthetics, and so on, it takes some creative thinking to get into that. The problem is, I don't believe that we're educating people and organizations to be creative, nor are we training them adequately, including in business schools. I think I think we can do a better job of that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So what I see here is what I call a skills gap, and I call it the creative skills gap as opposed to the traditional sense of a skills gap. And so you can see on the left side, at least from where I'm standing, on the left, where we are now is where we are. And the different colors show sort of partial creativity or partial unleashing of creative talent. Where we really want to be is we want to empower everyone, and great organizations do that. They empower everyone to be creative in some way or multiple ways. And so consequently, I think there's a creative skills gap out there. So unlike this traditional skills gap, which is usually focused on STEM and in the IT and technical industries, the creative skills gap I define as the gap between the creative skills of a workforce and the need to produce innovative new products and services. And so I think that's something that, I want to focus on and give you some reasons why that exists. So I'll give you 5 reasons why I think we have a creative skills gap. Number 1, there's a lack of definition. A lack of definition around actually what creativity is. Most leaders and managers don't have a really clear understanding of what creative expression is, and therefore they don't know how to encourage it. It's not just brainstorming. It's not just making up ideas. And so when we get to the contents of the book, my answer to that is that it's a much broader concept, and I've tried to ground it in behavioral theory as opposed to just cognitive or psychological functions, which is typically the way it's defined. Number 2, there's a certain lack of preparation that I see. Most people are afraid to create, or even admit to their own creative expression. I ask my students, how many of you consider yourself to be creative? Well, I'll ask you, how many of you consider yourself to be creative? Raise your hands. Okay, so only maybe a half, but in most cases it's only about 15–20% of the hands go up in a larger class. So why is that? Well, the biggest thing is a fear of judgment, and also we may not know how we're creative. Therefore, if most leaders and managers don't understand what creativity is, nor do they understand how to prepare people to get over those obstacles, we're not making that connection. And so consequently, if we don't have a plan for dealing with this inherent fear, we may actually even contribute to it. We may send signals that suggest that creativity is not necessarily rewarded at this organization. So that's one of the problems. The other problems I think in university is we don't offer enough opportunities to our business students to work in less structured environments, to actually think outside the box. I always ask my students, what do you want to get out of this course? And they all say, I want to think outside the box. Well, what does that mean? And when you do put them a little bit outside the box, they're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do now? So the fact is, true creative expression, it doesn't mean that you have no boundaries, but it does mean that you have to make up certain aspects of the boundaries or of the domain and that's part of the creative process. When Picasso was developing Cubism, he didn't have someone holding his hand, and when the founders of Google were developing their search engine, no one was leading them in that direction. Same thing with Apple products. When Steve Jobs, decided he wanted something, he really didn't care how you figured it out. He just wanted you to figure it out. The next problem, the third problem, is that most organizations send mixed messages. They'll use these buzzwords like, we want to be creative, we want to be cutting edge. They really don't understand what that entails. True innovation is disruptive, in the words of Clay Christensen. It means reconstructing how the organization does business and the way we think. So there's kind of this disconnect between espoused theory and practice. And so that's another key problem. The messaging is not really what we want. Following on that, because many leaders and managers, yet they invite innovation, yet they trap employees in systems that don't support risk-taking or action learning. Even if they want it to happen, we're oftentimes encasing employees in those types of systems. They may even be penalized. I had a student in another class, in a recent class on this topic, and as the course developed, she realized that she had many more creative talents than she gave herself credit for. She didn't really understand what it meant to be creative. And by the end of the class, we started to talk about performance systems and incentive systems and so on, and her annual reviews had no vehicle for recognizing her creative expression in any way. And she was making creative contributions to the organization frequently. So if we don't compensate for it, we have a problem. The final thing is that many leaders and managers have no idea what a really creative organization looks like. And that's really the subject for the second book. It's something I call the Poetic Organization. And so, it seems that you really can't make progress towards something if you can't see it, and that's part of visioning and understanding. So you need to have a pretty good, clear vision of that. And in the second book, I talk about that. So the 5 things: lack of definition, lack of preparation, poor messaging, poor incentives, and poor vision lead to this creative skills gap. There are probably other reasons, but those are the ones that I've identified. Are there any questions? Okay. So my answer to this problem was to write 2 books, and the 2 books are, the first one is to prepare and transform to transform the individual. So the focus for the first book, Fostering Creativity and Self in the Organization, is really to get at individual transformation and helping people to get over their fear of creating. The second book, because originally I wrote this really as 1 book, but the second book focuses on team development, because teams are the fundamental building blocks for organizations. And then finally, the organization. The organization is the context in which our teams operate. So how do we transform the organization consequently? So let me just explain the goals of the first book. So I focus on, and there are other ways to look at creativity. You can look at problem solving, you can look at idea generation, you can look at cognitive functions. But I'm more interested in what people do rather than what people say, or what they're thinking about. So I focused on specific creative behaviors that can be developed. And those include improvisational capacity, design proficiency, the ability to experiment or to tinker, creating aesthetic awareness, and strengths development. It seems to me that these critical success factors can be leveraged for both personal and team advancement. So that's the focus for the book, and I think it applies to a number of different individuals. One, individuals who want to develop their creative talents in multiple areas. We look at a variety of ways you can do that. It may be a good way to invigorate your career, or maybe you want to learn to improvise. Improvisation, and I'll get into what these things mean in just a minute, is a critical skill. So all of these, I think, are critical skills, life skills, but they're also critical organizational skills. I think that it's important for leaders, too, to better understand what are the varieties, the various ways that people can express their creativity. And I think for faculty, I'm hoping that faculty, and I have actually gotten quite a bit of positive response both at the Academy of Management and the recent conference that I was at, the Northeast Business and Economics Association. I've gotten very good response on both of the books, and their contributions. I'm hoping that this can be, because most of them are saying we don't really know how to teach creativity. There aren't many textbooks on this topic, and that's part of the reason why I wrote the books. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little video trailer for you. Just a little bit of background on this. Has anyone seen this yet? John's seen it. Okay. Well, for those of you who haven't seen it, so this is a 2-minute trailer, and in today's world, it's people think visually. They don't have a lot of time, and to just capture their attention, and part of really just trying to get the word out on things, you try to bring it down to a very succinct level. So what I did is they found me, but the timing was perfect. I worked with a video production company in New York, and young guys just starting out. They just started this company in the past year, and they contacted me, and 2 of them went to the London School of Economics. They have PhDs from the London School of Economics, and they said, "Gee, we're trying to help translate business research, help it bring it to the masses, and so our vehicle is video production." So I hooked up with them, and we produced this video, and it gives in 2 minutes. So the challenge was for me to write a script that they could then use to give the elements of the book. So let me give you, let me play it. You'll see the technology works here.
Our increasingly competitive economy is forcing companies to rethink their value propositions and business models. Consumers want well-designed products that are cool and that express their values. Unfortunately, many companies are ill-equipped to deliver. Why? Few recent graduates are prepared for the creative challenges posed by the new economy. Companies struggle to find and develop their creative talent. Making hip, functional, and affordable products requires imaginative and highly skilled people. We have a creative skills gap. For those who can address this gap, the benefits are enormous. Profitable companies, self-actualized workers, and a stronger economy. In the book, Fostering Creativity and Self in the Organization, Eric Stein, a business innovation expert and Wharton PhD, argues that the way forward is a new approach to nurturing and unleashing creative expression. He identifies 5 critical success factors. Improvisation is the ability to make effective decisions in new and complex situations using current information and appropriate routines. We must master the art of real-time decision-making by learning to improvise. Design is the ability to construct an object or process that meets the requirements of a particular user. We need to breathe life into new ideas, products, and services through design thinking. Experimentation is the ability to decide between 2 competing goals or viewpoints by designing a process that yields enough information to rank each choice. We need to tinker and to experiment in order to learn. Aesthetic awareness is the ability to discriminate between sensory inputs, recognize the feelings and thoughts invoked, and to rank the object in terms of beauty. We must recognize beauty in all its forms. To have the greatest impact, we must identify and develop our skills and areas of intelligence through hard work, practice, and discipline. Learn more about the power of ideas and fostering creativity at ericwstein.com.
Okay, so that gives you a brief overview of what I'm trying to do in the first book. And the second book follows from that. Whereas the first book we look at individuals, the second book we say, okay, well, most people work in teams, and so consequently, I try to develop or look at ways you can improve the effectiveness of what I call high-power creative teams. In this second book. So the book is really broken into 2 parts: teams and then organizational development. So in the team components, I'll go into what are the various factors that I think can help develop the effectiveness of a team. And the second part, I talk about this notion of the poetic organization, what it looks like. I think this book is useful for team leaders, for leaders of whole organizations, and also faculty who want to teach this. Again, I met a recent faculty who, looking at some of the team material, quite a bit of interest, and he said, gee, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So, it's exciting to know that there are folks out there who want to use this material and can use this material. So let me just give you a little bit of context. I'll go into some of the detail again. Feel free to stop me or to, try to kind of keep to the time and so on. So we have, another 35 minutes, so I'll, take this as far as, the time allows. This whole approach I call the ideas method. It's just kind of a unifying theme. IDEA stands for those components: improvisation, design thinking, experimentation, aesthetics, and strengths. But it's really more than that. It applies, as you can see, on different levels of analysis, individual, team, and organization. But there's some kind of core assumptions. From an individual perspective, the idea here is that we need to change ourselves, really, to start. We have to start to think of ourselves differently. We have to believe that we are creative. And everyone here in this room and everyone here on the planet is creative in some form. We just don't, exercise it. So it's really not a matter of genetics, but it's really a matter of commitment. So substitute the word commitment for genetics or inherent capabilities. So this goes back to kind of a myth of what is a creative person. A creative person is someone who creates on a frequent basis, right? They do it daily. Great writers, great painters. Well, they get up and they do it, whether they want to or not. That's when John gets up and he wants to, does he want to work on his book every day? Maybe, maybe not. But the mark of someone who's creative and dedicated to their craft and development, they do it day in and day out. Okay, and that's the crux of this. You get good by doing it. Practice, practice, and more practice. So it's a function of our practice skills and our practice and our commitment to practice that allows us creativity. And I'll talk about